Alright gamers, if you've been looking for some good builds to help you beat Onslaught on especially Legend difficulty, then this is the video for you. Today we have builds for each class focused on doing great ad clear while also providing good survivability because, well, you will absolutely need that for this activity. I won't go into crazy detail for the builds, but I will explain what you need to know, and hey, if you do want to have a more in-depth guide on any builds, I can gladly make a follow-up video. Now before we get into the video, I am streaming live on Twitch Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays starting at 1 PM EST, so if you'd like to come hang out or ask me some questions, feel free to stop by. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. So, the first class we're going to go over is Titan, which has two builds I've been using. The first one is a Consecration build utilizing pyrogale gauntlets, which I'm really surprised I haven't ran into more people using this, but hey, I get it, banner war goes crazy. This build's focus is to have crazy good uptime on your Consecration melees, spamming ignitions all over and holding down points solo. Also while having a high damage super for dealing with chunky enemies in waves and boss fights. The abilities used for this build are Rally Barricade, Throwing Hammer, and Thermite Grenade. The aspects used are going to be Consecration for big damage slided melees, and then Soul Invictus for ability regen and restoration in sunspots. The fragments are going to be Ember of Eruption for bigger ignitions, Ember of Singeing for class ability regen on scorching enemies, Ember of Searing for melee energy on scorch defeats, and of course Ember of Ashes for more scorch stacks. I'll also leave both the mods and seasonal mods on screen as well. Now the weapons used for this build are going to be Conditional Finality, Zauli's Bane, and then Fixed Odds for ad clear, with Succession, Zauli's or Sunshot, and then Dragon's Breath or G-Horn or Apex, depending on what the team brings for boss fights. Dragon's Breath can actually be a really solid pick due to its Scorch spam, allowing you to both bake the boss and adds around them, but of course, using two legendary rockets with a G-Horn will be way better for damage. Now the second build should be of no surprise. Banner of War has been dominating all PvE activity since its release, providing constant 40% damage resist with Woven Mail, and also a walking healing rift that will pulse health back to you, increasing with each tier, maxing at 4. It also provides a 40% melee damage bonus and a 10% sword damage bonus, and that isn't even including an exotic yet. And for this build, we're going to be using, you guessed it, Synthoceps, since there are so many enemies around that getting the damage buff is pretty much easy at all times, allowing you to put out some serious melee damage without really needing to do much at all. Now the abilities used for this build are going to be Rally Barricade, Frenzied Blade, and a Grapple Grenade. The aspects are going to be Banner of War and Into the Fray for both Woven Mail on Tangles and melee regen while Woven Mail is active. The fragments are Thread of Warding for Woven Mail and Orb pickups, Thread of Generation for grenade energy on dealing any type of damage, Thread of Transmutation for Tangles on weapon final blows while you have Woven Mail, and lastly, Thread of Fury for melee energy on damaging targets with the Tangle. I'll leave the mods and seasonal mods on screen for this build as well. Now the weapons used for this build are really any 1-2 punch shotgun, sword breaker preferred if you do have it, Zauli's Bane or Sunshot, and then tractor cannon or Fixed Odds for ad rounds. And then for boss fights, you're going to want to do again a 1-2 punch shotty, probably Zauli's, and then also G-Horn so you can buff allies rocket damage. Now for the hunter build I'm recommending is going to be a Deadfall Orpheus Hunter. It feels crazy to see this exotic shine again for the first time in really years, but Orpheus rigs are insanely strong for Onslaught. A nicely placed tether will almost always give you your entire super back, which is really nice in providing a way to suppress a large group of enemies, make them take 30% more damage with the debuff, and also have the damage shared between those that are tethered. The other strength of this build is being able to have multiple options of going invis on demand, giving you a get out of death free card, and also your allies at times. Now the abilities used for this are going to be Marksman's Dodge, Smoke Bomb, and then a Vortex Grenade, with the aspects Trapper's Ambush for a way to reliably go invis and get yourself out of sticky situations, and Vanishing Step for more or less pretty much the same thing. Now the fragments used for this build are going to be Echo of Starvation for Devour on Orb or Void Breach pickups, which is huge for survivability, Echo of Undermining so our Vortex Grenades will weaken enemies, Echo of Obscurity to go invis on finishers, and then Echo of Cessation to cause a burst that makes nearby enemies volatile when hitting a finisher. Now I'll leave both the mods and seasonal mods used for this build on screen as well. Now since there aren't any Void seasonal mods, we're going to end up using solar weapons to take advantage of both Radiant and Ignition from precision kills. The weapons I'm going to be using with this are going to be Conditional Finality, Sauli's Bane, and then Fixed Odds for Ad Clear, and then Succession, Sauli's, and G-Horn for bosses so I can buff teammates' rocket damage. Now, for Warlocks, I think we all know what I'm going to end up recommending, and it is a Phoenix Protocol Well Lock. With the focus being on spamming well often to provide your team with game-breaking survivability, while also utilizing fragments and seasonal mods to buff our ignitions, those being Ember of Combustion and Raise of Precision. The abilities used for this build are going to be Phoenix Dive, Celestial Fire, and a Fusion Grenade, with the aspects Icarus Dash for movement and Touch of Flame for big damage fusion nades. Then the fragments are going to be Ember Benevolence to grant yourself a massive ability regen buff for applying any type of solar buff to allies, Ember of Singeing for class ability regen on scorching enemies, Ember of Combustion for ignitions on solar weapon kills from inside your well, and then lastly, of course, Ember of Ashes for extra scorch stacks. Now I'll also leave the mods and seasonal mods for this build on screen as well. The weapons I'm going to end up using for this build are a Blinding GL, Sunshot, and then Fixed Odds for Ad Clear rounds, and then Succession, Sunshot, and Apex for boss fights. Now the second build is also going to be on well, and I'm recommending this the most for any players who are running Legend on Warlock. This build's focus is around using Cenotaph Mask to spawn in what feels like infinite heavy ammo. And let me tell you, when you hit 35 plus in Legend, it really helps out since enemies just become tanky as all hell, and being able to spam rockets constantly is so good. Now while you won't have the crazy well uptime as in comparison to Phoenix, as long as you have a tether to spam orbs, and then, another teammate to at least spawn some orbs here and there, you should be getting your supers back fairly quickly. Now the abilities used for this build are going to be Phoenix Dive, Incinerator Snap, and then a Healing Grenade, with the aspects Icarus Dash and Touch of Flame so we can get some boosted heals. Now the fragments for this build are going to be Ember Benevolence for ability regen on applying solar buffs to allies, Ember of Singeing for faster class ability regen when we scorch targets, Ember of Combustion so that we can still have a form of ad clear in our well from defeating enemies with solar weapons, and then Ember of Benevolence for an increase to Radiant and Restoration applied to you. This last one can really be changed to whatever you want, it's more of just a personal choice. Now just like the rest of the builds, I'll leave the mods and seasonal mods on screen that I'm using for this as well. So the weapons used for this build are going to be either Appetence, so we can still use Sunshot for some ad clear, or Divinity, so we can apply a debuff to enemies while also marking them to generate heavy ammo for allies. Pick whichever one is more comfortable to you really. For the weapons I'm using, it's going to be Sunshot and Fixed Odds with Appetence, and then switching to Apex for boss damage, and then if I'm using Divinity, it's going to be with Fatebringer and Fixed Odds, and again switching to Apex for boss damage. Now I just wanted to say again, if you are actually struggling to beat Legendary, then please try out Cenotaph build. Regardless of what class you're playing, your teammates will love you and it'll make runs so smooth since you can just spawn in heavy ammo like crazy, allowing your teammates to just spam damage out non-stop. While it might not be the most fun playstyle, this support role is just insane in helping your teammates just blow through enemies. So I hope these builds can provide help to any of those who are trying to clear Legend difficulty. I feel like they're pretty easy to use and have shown to be pretty strong for me. Also leave any builds in the comments that you might have been using to help out other players who might be looking for a different kind of build. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Let me know if y'all been enjoying Onslaught because so far I've really been loving it. But I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!